Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. Well, the trailer shows you the hit on the head, Andy, so I feel like I'm going to chalk that one up as a win.
As we've learned from movie trailers, it's all in selling those big moments.
These have been such valuable moments,
Really,
I think, to learn. Yes, that's the blink. That's the moment we had with the baseball bat to the head. And so we got a number of moments. I don't think there are few moments that actually indicate what this movie is about. We do have there are good kidnappings and bad kidnappings line, which sets the stage for what this thing is about. But I think it would be incredibly difficult to have this job given to a trailer cutter and say, as a result, we want to know of this trailer, we want the audience to know what this movie is about, because this movie is a whole bucket load of bananas. And I think the trailer cutter had to just wash their hands of this, because there's no way that you're going to tell the audience what this movie is about. It was crazy.
What I do love in the trailer is they actually, the subtitles that come up throughout, kind of giving you a sense of the story.
Yeah.
They have the line, "All tragedies start with her." As if the entire thing is the girlfriend's fault, which I thought was pretty
Right.
pretty funny.
Right.
I mean, yes, she does have this whole kidnapping scheme that she comes up with, but I mean, she has nothing to do with his idiotic decision to sell his kidney to these organ thieves.
Right. Beyond that, I don't have a whole lot to say about the trailer, other than this. I probably would have committed, had I seen the trailer in theaters and before seeing the movie, I probably would have said, yeah, I'll check that out on rental or streaming. I don't think this trailer would have driven me to the theater.
Maybe when it says from Park Chan-Wook, director of Joint Security Area, that might have gotten me in, because I did really enjoy that film quite a bit.
Yeah, but still, you're not really selling your enthusiasm with a maybe.
Well, it's one of those things where you're right. The challenge with this film is it's not an easy one to kind of sell the whole concept of it. And watching this trailer, like it doesn't tell me much about what this story is really about. It's just a very vague idea of, okay, there's some revenge going on or something, and it's called Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, or what was it called in Korean? It's not
Vengeance is Mine.
Vengeance is Mine, right? So you have a vague idea that, okay, there's vengeance involved. You see some people in precarious situations, but you don't get any sense of the story, and it is a really complicated, in a weird way, sort of story. I mean, yes, I guess you get the sense of the kidnapping and stuff, but it's a challenging. You're right. It's a challenging trailer to cut for any trailer cutter, because this is it's a very weird film, and I guess I would call this a win. What they put together here. Did you happen to watch the U.S. trailer that was released in 2005 when it was released here?
I didn't see that trailer.
Oddly, I didn't find it that much more clear with the story. It's they just really emphasize, from the director of Oldboy, because by then the whole trilogy had been out, and just in a way to kind of sell the film better. But it also is kind of that way, and so I think that just goes to show this is a tricky film to cut an effective trailer for.
Well, tricky film, and just chock full of crazy, and I mean crazy.
세상에는 말이야, 좋은 유괴가 있고 나쁜 유괴가 있어. 좋은 유괴는 부모의 협조가 필수적이지. 경찰에 신고를 하니까 아이가 죽는 일이 생기는 거야.
나름대로 착하게 살았다고 생각합니다. 근데 도대체 왜 나를...
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright. That there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're in it for revenge. We're kicking off our series on the Vengeance trilogy of Park Chan-Wook with his 2002 film Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you enjoy tuning in and are interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back-channel conversations on Discord, help us pick movies for upcoming series, and listen to the members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee, where we talk movies, trailers, and more. Plus, we have a battle of the lists of movies related to our show that week. In honor of this film, this week we're going to be talking about some of our favorite revenge films. Should be fun. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
Vengeance is Mine. Andy, look, I've been trying to approach all the movies that I watch through the same eyes that you gave to Detroit.
Oh, the 5-star cutoff?
Well, no, there's that, and I want to talk about that. Obviously, that is a new, critically important metric for the show, around which I think we should start building more of our efforts. No, you said that, gosh, for a movie called Detroit, I want to see more of Detroit. Like, there should be more Detroit stories. This is a story of the Algiers. There's not enough Detroit. That was kind of your position. Am I characterizing that right?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay. So, I was sick last week, and so I've been watching a lot of movies. I watched Warcraft, right? our friend
lucky you, yeah.
Duncan Jones.
Yep. Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure, and I think that one fits the Andy rule, that there is in fact both war and craft, and there's plenty of it across Azeroth. So Warcraft has its Power Rangers. There are both there is power and there are Rangers, and there's a lot of it, and so that fits. So I'm looking at this movie. How much sympathy and or vengeance do we have on display in this movie? And not only is there vengeance in this movie, it is vengeance carried out upon vengeance, carried out upon vengeance. This is the Mobius strip of vengeance of this movie. It is very disturbing on a number of levels. Not just, there are sequences that are hard to watch. It's not a terribly gory movie. I mean, it's not a film that really, it's got some violent things in it that are hard to look at, but certainly not quite up to the next film in the series we're going to be talking about. But in this one, man, they execute on vengeance upon vengeance, and on that point, I think Park Chan-Wook has really hit it out of the park.
There is a lot of vengeance in here, and it was really interesting to see, in the, I guess, the genre or maybe subgenre of revenge films, exactly how he was playing with that, and especially with a film that, at least here in the States, is titled Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. It was interesting to see. Well, what I thought was interesting is I felt like they were playing with the whole concept of your protagonist, and who do you root for in a film, and who do you like, and when everybody in one way or another is kind of enacting revenge, who are you supporting, who are you siding with? And that was kind of my sense of that title, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Are we supposed to be sympathizing with Rio as he goes on this crazy, revenge rampage, because he's trying to help his sister with a kidney. And so he donates his, and it's a mess. And so he wants to go after those people, but first he needs the money, and this whole thing with the kidnapping, and then the kidnapped girl's father and his revenge. Who is really the one that we are sympathizing with in this film? In the end, I felt like the one we sympathize with the most is probably the father, because by the end of the film, Rio has really kind of taken a dark turn and is just, gone down bonkers row and is eating the kidneys of the people who stole his. It's like he's really kind of devolved. And
so you're saying no more sympathy for him.
No more sympathy for him.
No.
Right. I think he ends up no, but I think what happened is there is some sympathy, but it's not the sympathy that you would expect in a protagonist. It's more sympathy in, this is a guy who's had a very difficult life. He was born and grew up mute. And now he wants to help his sister, and he makes a bad decision and ends up having to go down this road, and it makes a mess of everything. And because of that, it turns him down a dark path. And I find some sympathy because he is in it in the very beginning, trying to do what's right. And so it's very sad, I guess, in the end. Maybe it's more empathy by the time you get to the end.
Well, I think so. And because you start out as sympathetic for him because of the way they paint him as, mute. And in fact, the subtitles keep using, deaf and dumb. I think that's how they open it. I was born deaf and dumb. And as he's writing the letter to the radio station, that she's going to have to end up kind of describing to him, which I thought was a very touching moment. So we open the film at this high bar of sympathy. Like, we feel sympathy for him just because of the way he lives in the world. And you think that he's making these decisions, to go down this path to help his sister, that, when a character like this does something good, it is usually rewarded in film. And that's that's sort of the first surprise that we get, that he goes to his backwater organ outfit from a sticker on a urinal wall it starts to get very confusing kind of emotionally, because you had one perspective on this character and it starts to evolve, and he breaks bad kind of right in front of us. He breaks crazy right in front of us, which I think is a really interesting, it's an interesting way to play with us a little bit, because it's well into the movie before we actually meet the character that we end up feeling sympathy for at the end, the father.
And what I really appreciated about this film and liked is that Park Chan-Wook is taking this story in a direction where it's not kind of a normal story structure. We start with one character, our protagonist, who by the time we get to the end, we really are not liking some of the decisions that he's made. And we end up sympathizing with this other character who, yeah, like you said, he doesn't come in until almost halfway through the film. And it's so strange the way that he's kind of playing with our expectations as to what we get in a revenge thriller.
I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. And, you know, to that end, it really is kind of his girlfriend who does push him down this dark road of the kidnapping. Because, I mean, yes, he made this incredible bungle of making the decision to sell his kidney to these people, assuming that they were going to be honest and get him another kidney so that she could get the kidney she needed. Of course, that doesn't happen. And they leave him abandoned in that empty building. But it's her. It really is her who's just like pushing this whole kidnapping thing, and not just his boss's, his former boss's kid, but this whole circuitous route of saying, you can't go that route because it's too obvious. You have to kidnap the child of his boss's child's friends. Was that right? Yeah. The child of the boss's friends, whose kids they play together, and that way they can't trace it directly to you. It was like nonsense logic. The whole thing was so silly. Nonsense. That whole conversation where I didn't even get what was going on the first time. When I looked at it again, I'm like, oh, okay, that's who Jong Jin is. He's the boss's friend. Did you have to go back and watch the sequence where the kid's in the car to figure out which little girl belonged to which man? Like, I had to watch that 3 or 4 times to figure out, what are they trying to tell me here? I watched it once, and then I watched it with the director's commentary, and they helped clarify exactly like who was who and what. Because the first time I'm like, wait a minute, I don't understand who they. For the longest time, I was convinced that they kidnapped the boss's daughter, and so that's something that I think the way it's a really interesting way that Park constructs his film, because he does it in a way where he really makes you have to work for it. You have to really struggle to make sure you are following all the little bits and pieces. It's not like a simple Hollywood film where all the pieces are laid out nicely for you. This is a much more complex story, and I probably would have gotten it on a second or third watch and go, oh, okay, now I see what's going on. Or you just really have to pay attention. Is that a problem? It can be,
Well, it certainly can for accessibility, kind of approachability for the film. I mean, it narrows the audience.
Oh, absolutely. But, he even said, as a director, I think this unkind way of presenting the story makes the viewer more active in watching the film. It may irritate some viewers. I think he is, essentially actively trying to make something that isn't going to, follow the expected path of kind of that Hollywood storytelling, but make you really have to work for it. I do like that he really pushed it. And even though I was really confused, and I think I would have gotten it on subsequent viewings, I do wonder if it was as effective as it could have been. I think that maybe after a couple more films, he would have been even a stronger storyteller and found a way to do that where we understood it right away.
I like this movie. I really do. I mean, I had a good time with this movie, but I feel like there's a certain amount of permissiveness that a director has to give an audience to kind of come into this world. And this movie is not very forgiving. And I think that's just an important thing to be aware of.
Especially after his previous I don't know if it's directly his previous film, but Joint Security Area. I had seen that, and I felt it was a very enjoyable, very straightforward sort of film. Maybe it wasn't quite straightforward Hollywood, but it certainly was a fairly linear story, and I got it. I understood everything going on, and I walked out of it really enjoying it. This film, and this was his next film a couple years later, was a more challenging watch. And the fact that he really was pushing us to play with our expectations of what we get in a revenge film and who we follow and how the story unfolds. I mean, I really do appreciate it. I definitely do. But yes, it may have been to a fault in some particular points. As we found, it wasn't as clear as it probably needed to be. And that makes it frustrating.
What's interesting, though, is on the almost direct flip side of that point, I think it was incredibly efficient in both in crafting the script and in how it was shot, in actually taking a lot of small characters and giving us just the right little bits of information about them to make them feel like more robust participants in this world. We have little things like the girlfriend, Duna Bay, her character, that she's this anarchist and she's handing out these flyers. So when the father shows up to her house, to her apartment, and hooks up the electrodes to her ear, she says, I'm part of an organization. They're terrorists and they'll straight up kill you. And we later hear the police say, well, no, I mean, she was a part of a terrorist organization of one. But it turns out that was exactly what was happening. And I think that was that this terrorist organization actually was real. It allowed us to learn a lot about her, very quickly. One of the police officers, we're talking about in our deep scene dive tonight, takes a call, and it turns out the voices on the call, they're talking about the same thing that the movie is about, right? This sort of organ donation. Every one of these characters has this one extra layer that we get about them through a bit of dialogue or a side scene or a line tossed to the side that gives us a really fascinating look at who they really are. And it makes these characters in what could otherwise be a rather convoluted, again, kind of unforgiving narrative, have greater depth. And I really appreciated that.
Well, and it gives us a sense of a lot of the absurdist way that Park Chan-Wook and his writers look at this world, right? You have this really kind of dark story that also has some strangely humorous moments scattered throughout, and the way they tie those through, and then you have these shots of you only see their apartment neighbors a couple times, and the first time it's the four of them all stroking off as they're listening to the sister in her kind of moans of pain, while they're mistaking it for sounds of the neighbors having sex. And it's just like
weird
the
and
strangest
horrific.
little it's so shocking to see that. I'm like, what?
What's so interesting, though, Andy, how often do we come away from a sex scene in a movie and say, hey, that sex scene was great? And I think this sex scene was great. They end up having a conversation about their relationship in sign while they are having sex. And it was awkward and funny, and it was not portrayed in any way, shape, or form as sexualized.
Right.
It was just as practical. I mean, they were clearly enjoying themselves in between this conversation that they were having. But I actually thought that's a sex scene. That gives us something. It teaches us something about the character more than just a parade of flesh.
Yeah, they do a really good job of finding the way to balance moments throughout the film. Another example is the way that the father deals with the two autopsies that he goes to. The first time he goes to an autopsy, it's for his daughter, and he's just breaking up, and we're only looking at him. We're not seeing anything, but we're seeing his reactions to everything that's happening. and it's just painful, and it's awful, and it's shocking, and it's, you know, as a father, it's just horrifying. You can feel yourself in that situation as he's trying not to completely just break down into a puddle. And then the second time, it's after he discovered Rio's sister buried under the rocks by the river, and he's watching it, and he's just yawning. He's like, he's no longer, you know, seeing anything about these people. It's all just about kind of, you know, more clues to get closer to revenge. And it was really interesting the way that they played with the subtle comedy and sometimes the really absurdist comedy in this really dark story.
Well, you know, the absurdist comedy of the disabled fellow that kind of wanders around the water, which was both terrifying. On one hand, this is the first time I think we see him. I think this is the first time we see him is when the young girl falls into the water accidentally. But the way it's shot, the way it's presented, is that you think that this disabled fellow has some sort of hand in it. And I felt tricked, right? And not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, I felt tricked that you know, it wasn't more than an accident. And I thought that was a really great scene. But later, this guy comes up and he's you know, moving rocks as he's trying to bury another character along the banks, and he's just always either in the way or kind of moving around, and each character takes a turn at sort of, you know, pushing him out of the way or dodging him or scaring him or spooking him or something. And I found it a really interesting, I don't know, kind of a metaphor for welcoming to end of life, right? I mean, it's just a very awkward place, and everything that happens in this set, in this setting, it has something to do with end of life, and you know, whether it's actively, you know, dying or burying a character and sending it on to another way, and so I found it really. I don't know. It was hard to laugh, but I couldn't help but laugh in some of these sequences.
Well, and I think that's what Park was really going for. That may not have exactly worked. You know, I think it was harder one for audiences to really connect with, and it may have taken people aback as they watched this, and they're like, "Am I supposed to be laughing? Why is this?" You know, it's some dark, serious stuff, and then all of a sudden these absurdist moments. And I don't know, for me, all of that worked really well. Like, I liked that balance that they had, because it kind of let you kind of relax a little bit from some of the darker stuff that was happening. It was still kind of darkly humorous. It wasn't just like flat out funny, but there was a darkness, kind of there was a darker subtext to it. And for me, I thought that it was done really well.
What do you think of sound? I want to hear you talk a little bit about sound, because sound is very important when we have at least our initial, we'll call him our initial protagonist, Rio, is mute, and how they handle sound from whenever we're working with his perspective.
Well, that was something I really appreciated with this movie, is how they played with sound to both emphasize his muteness and also just to allow us into this rich world of sound that really he never gets to hear. I thought they really played with it in such great ways. They have some fantastic editing choices with the sound. One example that really stuck with me was pretty early on in the film when he's talking to the doctor, or I should say the doctor is talking to him about the fact that, you know, he put down the wrong blood type and he can't donate his kidney to his sister because he's a type B. He's not the right type. And it's a really great scene early on in the film. But then as the doctor is talking to him, we cut outside of the window where it's raining, and we see Rio as he's kind of watching the doctor's lips, reading his lips, but we don't hear anything. We just hear the sound of rain. So it was a really interesting example of jumping farther than we normally would jump to. We're not just over the shoulder of the doctor as Rio's watching his lips. We are actually outside the window and we're not hearing anything, which is really exciting because now we are essentially in the same place as Rio. We can't hear anything. And, if we can't read lips, then we're out of luck. It made for a really interesting example of them playing with the whole idea of sound and what it means to a particular character who is mute and can't hear or speak. And the way that was done, we when we were talking about Snatch with sound recorder Michael Coffey, he talked about how, it's frustrating for him sometimes to watch scenes where the way that they cut the cameras and the way the sound design plays, the sound is always perfectly clear for the audience. It doesn't change with the cuts. And while I can see why, filmmakers largely are probably going to keep it where people can hear it because they want to hear what's going on, I found this a really good example of exactly what he's talking about, where this is a director who's using sound to really put us into the protagonist's head. And when we jump to these places where all of a sudden we can't hear anything, there's a really good reason why.
I totally agree. Practically, I absolutely agree and agree with Michael. And that's a great point. I thought the very same thing. I also think it's a great example of how this film is unforgiving because it's a shock. It's a shock as soon as you're listening to something, you feel like there's something you need to hear, and yet you are then taken away from it. Another movie that kept coming into mind with that sequence was The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, where we are so deeply locked into this one character's perspective that when people walk in and out of his field of view, both, obviously we can't see them anymore, we can't hear them anymore, and that our whole dynamic changes. That kind of stuff goes on in this movie, and I think it's very effective for this character. And I also am glad that more directors tend to be more gracious.
Right. Because it was challenging. Like you said, it's a very unforgiving way to tell a story.
And I don't mean hard, like challenging hard. I feel like it's exhausting, right? I mean, maybe that's the better word for it. It is an exhausting thing, sort of. This is a high calorie burn movie in terms of intellectual calories, right? To kind of keep pace with it. Anyway, go ahead. Well,
not just for reasons like the way that they're playing with the sound, but also just the way that he cuts the story and tells it. I mean, it really works. They're talking about this whole kidnapping of the kid. All of a sudden we cut to this park scene and they're like playing hopscotch or one of these like little weird jump rope games that you play, and his girlfriend is singing this song as the sister.
She's singing like
you're doing this thing,
this communist song.
Yeah, right. But then all of a sudden the kid comes in and it's her turn. And it's like, oh, so they already did the kidnapping and here they are just kind of playing with her and stuff. And it took me a minute to really kind of sort out what was happening and the fact that this was the kidnapped girl and they already had gone through with the kidnapping. It really is making you work hard to figure out, oh, okay, the kidnapping itself isn't important at all. Here we are post-kidnapping, and now they're just dealing with the repercussions of the fact that they have this kid now.
Which is really so beautiful because this is not a caper movie. It's in the title. It's a vengeance movie. So we want to focus on the things which come after.
Right.
And I think that was just, I was really moved by that choice to eliminate the kidnapping altogether.
Right. Yeah. It made for a really fascinating way to kind of move us through the story. And he does that quite a bit as he's telling the story. Right before our deep scene dive, we have the moment where Rio is looking at the dead girl's body in the water. We see his face in shock, the fact that this just happened. We cut to the girl and we see her dead body in the water, and then we cut back, but it's not Rio anymore. It's Jung Jin, as he is now looking at his dead daughter's body in the water. And we've had a huge time jump after, this whole thing has been discovered and the police have come and the father's been notified, and now he's out here and he sees her body in the water for the first time. It's a really interesting way to kind of condense time and move us through the story that much quicker.
really effective use of camera. I think so much of the strength of this movie, if you're having trouble with the narrative, let yourself go and just watch how they make your eyes move. There's a lot of strength in shot composition.
Yeah, all through the film. It's just really brilliantly thought out. The compositions are clearly designed as we're watching, whether it's just the way the characters are looking into the camera as the not really breaking the fourth wall, looking into the camera like we were talking about in some of our musicals, but this is really more just the way that they've chosen to frame it as if, we are this mute person who really has to look at somebody and read their lips, to just the close-ups that we would get of like the red thumb after he's doing his termination contract, or the silhouettes passing the windows, and the way that the shots, the window frame changes as he's kind of going into the kidney thief's lair, or that sideways shot of the rose on the ground when he wakes up. I mean, just all through it, really fascinating compositions, and using the camera in an effective way. I noticed that there was a lot of long shots throughout the film, which was really nice to just have this sense of long still shots where we didn't necessarily need the movement. He allowed things to happen within the frame, and it makes moments like when he wakes up from having his kidney removed and he's left barren and naked in this abandoned building, you get this fantastic moving shot where the camera just moves back so fast. It's like this handheld shot as they basically run back from his body. It really makes that stand out and hit you that much harder, because all of a sudden it's like, whoa, oh wow, we're getting some movement here. Really effective.
Yeah, and I think one of the just incredible compositions is happens in the elevator when they have this at the point where that we sort of join the shot. We have a whole bunch of authority figures, right? Police and medical personnel in the elevator. We have Ryu, and we have this a stretcher, and a body is strapped to the stretcher, and Ryu doesn't know who the body is. It turns out it's actually Young-mi, and when we have the sheet falls off of her head, and we have this two shot on their head, and then we go down and there's and he reaches under the sheet and grabs her hand, and it is both, oh my God, gross, like that it feels very awkward and strange, and also so loving, and I think really highlights the conflict that you feel sequence after sequence in this movie.
Absolutely. That's a great example of a shot that I found so incredibly touching. And I know that that was a shot that Park Chan-Wook was not sure if he should actually include, because he was worried that people would find it kind of comical that here he was kind of holding the dead girl's hand, but everybody convinced him to keep it. And I think rightfully so. It really, for me, was a very poignant and powerful kind of goodbye from him to her.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about the literal translation of the film, but this was not the original title of the script.
Yeah, I guess when they first were working on the script, the title of it was The Destroyed Man. They felt it was a little too past tense, I think, is what he said in the commentary. He was looking for something that was a little more active. And so that's where the vengeance is mine came from. So
it's funny. The more we talk about it, the less I feel like vengeance is mine is an appropriate title either. I thought when I first read it that, oh yeah, that's much better than Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. But I'm not sure that either one of them really works.
Yeah, it's a tricky story. It's a tricky thing to title. I kind of am partial to the English title because I like this idea of this playing with the concept of sympathy in a revenge story. And I felt like after I had watched the film and thought about the title, it gave me more to really reflect on as far as what my expectations were walking into a revenge story. And the fact that if you watch any other revenge story and you see, this person take revenge on somebody, and they're the protagonist, and you feel good, like, yeah, they got him and stuff. But you're looking, then in retrospect, you look at it and it's like, gosh, that was a pretty awful thing that just happened. And here I am cheering them on. I really appreciated that this title gave me pause and made me really think about, what does that mean when you're looking at a revenge film, and what is the sympathy for?
Right. Well, speaking of sympathy, let's do the deep scene dive.
Yes, let's.
We are in the van. We're in a van. We're on in a crime scene. We are witnessing a conversation between Park Dong-jin, who's the president of this company, and the father of young kidnapped Yusan. And we are he's being interviewed by Lee Dae-yeon, who is the inspector of the police department. Why did we pick this scene?
Yeah, it's right pretty much at the midpoint of the film. It's about 56 to 59 minutes in the film. This is when the inspector is talking to Dong-jin about, do you have enemies? Trying to get a sense of what's going on. The fact that he didn't call the police when his child was kidnapped. Why didn't you call the police? Oh, I thought, this happened more often and the kids were returned fine when you paid up. It is really interesting the way it kind of sets up a sense of who this character is. And this is really largely our first chance to spend a good bit of time with Dong-jin after we kind of see him, just a couple of fleeting glimpses of him pre-kidnapping. This is our chance to really get a sense of this person. And it's what I found really poignant and powerful and interesting about this scene is that it's largely one shot where we have we're looking kind of through the car and through this van, and we with both the sides open. And we're really focused on the inspector. And all we see of Dong-jin are his legs, and the rest of him is kind of blocked out by the body of the car. And we hear his voice, and it's this raspy, broken voice of this father that has been weeping and screaming and so upset about everything that's happened. Not to mention tied up and kidnapped, right? I mean, that happened briefly before this, where he was left on the top of this place, tied to a pole with a bag over his head, screaming for help. And here we have this really interesting moment where we just get this broken voice of this man who is just utterly devastated because his daughter is dead. And it creates a really interesting world. But what's interesting is it also, as you pointed out earlier, sets up this whole idea of this inspector also having this life outside of what's happening here. He gets a phone call and he takes it kind of outside of the van. And we hear him talking about a situation largely similar to what's going on, where he doesn't have the 10 million won to pay for whatever procedure it is that his son needs.
Yeah.
I can't remember how he ends it, but he's just like, hey, at least our kid's not dead in the lake or whatever.
Right. Right.
That's so horrible.
It's a real officer sensibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Which spurs Dong-jin to kind of get up and walk out of the vehicle. But it really portrays this sense of this world and the pain that Dong-jin's going through.
Yeah, I thought that was really important. And I think that, you described the framing of the shot. I think the framing of the shot is also, really important to the narrative, certainly our narrative of Dong-jin, that we don't get to see him, that the focus is on the police and the police investigation, and that he is kind of pushed out. Literally pushed out, figuratively pushed out through this interrogation, and literally pushed out of the frame, I think is really telling and sets up the second half of the film as his half of the film, right? This is now we know that he is, we have a better sense for the fact that he is the one that we are going to feel sympathy for, even as he becomes Mr. Vengeance, right? And I think this marks an important transformation. I couldn't get out of my head the scene from The Wire in the first season, where the two officers go to this apartment, this crime scene that's been checked over and over and over again, but they have to check it again, check some new material, whatever, new evidence, whatever, or they think they're going to find something that the previous officers didn't, and they do the whole scene saying the F word to one another, right? It's legendary wire work, and it's been talked about over and over and over again. I have the same kind of feeling for in a number of areas in this movie, where I feel like I would have a better sense for what was going on if my Korean were better, right? If I could turn off the subtitles and really just listen to the language, because I feel like the economy of language in this script and in this scene make it so that, there is a lot going on that you miss if you don't get the precision of words that they're saying, and because how they're saying it and understanding the intention of what they're saying is so important. And so I feel like this is one of those movies where that extra, the veil is still down a little bit. And this is one of those sequences where you feel like really understanding where the father is and where the inspector is, and where the inspector is related to the father, and the cultural sort of understanding of one another. Clearly there is an issue around, net worth and classism and, all of these questions that come up that are both logical questions to ask if you're a police officer, and if you don't have a lot of money for a very important procedure, you might be feeling a bit bitter. In that sequence. And so it's full of complexity that I think is deceptive until you stop and slow down and really just watch it closely. I love this sequence, both as a pivot for the film. It's a major turning point, obligatory scene for the film, but also as just a nuanced bit of performance.
I completely agree. This is it's a real interesting actors moment, like the way that the actors get to portray the scene. I found exciting and done really effectively. The way that the director puts the framing together and decides, I'm going to tell this whole thing, show this entire conversation from one shot until he gets out of the car and walks away. I thought that was really exciting. The Kim Byong-il did the camera work. I thought it was just really effectively done here. Likewise, just the way that Kim Jae-byum and Kim Sang-byum do the editing and cut this together, I found really effective. Plus the sound design that Kim Chang-seop does. I mean, it's done so nicely through this sequence. It's simple, but it's deceptively simple, and I think that's what I found worked so nicely here. Because sometimes in the film, it's much more in your face with some of those kind of the difficult choices that not difficult, but difficult for the audience as Park makes some decisions as far as how he's telling the story and constructing it, that makes it more challenging for us as viewers to get into. This is a moment where they take that simplicity in a way that it's hardly noticeable, but it's done so effectively. I also just wanted to reiterating, we've talked about Song Kang-ho in our show before when we were doing our Bong Joon-ho series. He was in both Snowpiercer and The Host. And he's been in a number of other films and a lot of great films. And it was really nice to see him pop up here as Dong Jin. I thought he was, for me, really the highlight of the film. I mean, yes, we do end up sympathizing with him more as we get to the end. And I don't think that was really the reason that I found him so compelling more than anyone else. But I find him a really engrossing actor to watch.
Oh, I do too, and I think it's interesting you say that. Like we do, I guess, feel sympathy for him as the father of the dead girl, but he's also, his vengeance drives him to be not a nice guy. Like that's sort of the complexity of our relationship with him. Like we are feeling sympathy for a guy who's not a good guy in this context.
But he is the one who, and granted, Rio can't speak, so he can't say any apologies or anything. But at least before Dong Jin essentially kills Rio,
Yeah.
he kind of has that conversation with him. I know you're a nice guy, but I have to do this anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that feels really, I don't know, authentic to you.
It did. I totally bought it. I totally felt like he was really, it pained him to do this because
Yeah, no, you're right.
I don't
You're
think
right.
I don't think he had gone down the dark road that Rio had gone down. I felt like Rio after his girlfriend was killed, I think he turned down a very dark corner when he decided, I'm going to go after the kidney people. I'm going to kill them. I'm going to eat their kidneys.
That was dark. Yeah, that was truly
this
dark.
guy who,
but it was especially because the kidney people were mother and son kind of an outfit. That was
a very
awful.
shocking thing to learn. Like,
Yeah.
oh, mom and son. That's pretty horrible.
Yeah, that was pretty
And
good.
son is over here screwing the drugged out body of the
God.
person whose organ they're stealing right now. Oh, jeez.
Really dark, this movie in some places.
Yes.
Really dark.
Oh, yes. So anyway, anyone else in the cast that stood out for you?
Well, I mean, I just want to bring up Doona Bae again because Bae Doona, since it's a Korean film, she is the girlfriend and the anarchist, and she's wonderful. And we remember her from films that we loved so much, the English language films like Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending. I know is a really popular film among our audience. But she was in those, but she's also, she was in The Host, which consistently splits you and I in our flip chart ranking. So I think she's delightful. And so it was fun to see her in such a crazy part.
I loved her in this. She was such a weird, just kind of off the wall, crazy, breath of fresh air because of just the insane revolutionary side of her. I had so much fun with her as a character, even when I was like, she's such an idiot. Why are you listening to her about this kidnapping? Oh, goodness gracious. But no, she was great. I really just enjoyed the cast. I thought that the young girl who plays Yu's son, Han Bo-bae, really, I mean, I would have a hard time as a parent letting my child be in a movie like this because it's so shocking. But I felt like she had this real great sense about her. And sometimes I really struggle with kid actors, but I liked her quite a bit.
Well, and the portrayal of her as dead, it was tough. I mean, almost every sequence when she first died, when she's floating under the water, the shot of her on her side with just her eye, above the surface of the water is iconic from this movie. And then, of course, we watch her burn in the cremation, and it is horrifying. And we really, I mean, just a close-up of her hand and her doll, but my goodness, that's all you need. If honestly you needed that at all, it's a really tumultuous sequence.
Also, I found really fascinating about her as a character is that in this world, we end up getting her coming back as a ghost and talking to her father and having this really amazingly tender moment between the two of them. And she has this line that was so funny to me, but funny in a way that was like that painful humor that, there's such honesty in it, the way the kids say things. And she says, "Daddy, why didn't you give me swimming lessons a bit earlier?"
Oh my God. Andy. Yes. That is thing. If that's not the central line from the movie, I don't know what is.
Yeah, right. It said a lot about that entire situation, and really that because her death is really an accident, it really speaks so much to the whole thing about where this film is going. So it was really, really quite an interesting line and made for a really touching scene and I love that it was included because it's such a strange thing to all of a sudden have this ghost thing. She disappears from the photo and then here she is in front of him, and he gives her a hug, and she had drowned. So, of course, her dead, ghostly body is all covered in like, water, slime, and she's completely wet. And later, when the inspector is over at his house, he sees a puddle on the floor, and it's like, was that real? Was she really here? Did he just happen to spill some water on the floor? What's going on? I don't know, but it made it that much more of a rich world for me.
Music was by the Boo Project. Can you say that, Andy? What is the Boo Project?
I don't know. I guess it's just a few people who created this group, the Boo Project, that did the music for the film. And wow, it's not a film score I would listen to, but in context of the film, I found it worked really effectively. There were moments where it just kind of kicked in. I can't remember the specific ones. I want to say one of them is around the autopsy of his daughter. And it's just like this really discordant, like crazy jazz music that's playing that just for me captured the painful raw emotion of everything going on. All the way up through like the music that plays at the end when we build, we see that the crazy shot of that final moment as Dong-jin is dying by the river, and he's looking at these body bags or these bags of body parts of Ryo that he has there. And then you have this other music kicking in. The music worked so effectively in the film. I just was completely impressed with the Boo Project and what they brought here.
I think it's funny that you discovered the Korean version of the DVD actually released a black and white version of this movie.
I thought that was such a fascinating little tidbit to learn. And, I have become quite a fan of that type of film release ever since I saw The Mist.
Oh, I would watch this movie in black and white. That seems great.
Yeah, it was absolutely a fantastic tidbit to learn, and I was so jealous that this film, I guess it just didn't do well enough in foreign markets it didn't do well enough really anywhere to warrant that much of a push. But wow, this is one I would love to see in a really pristine Blu-ray in black and white.
I would too. I think this looks really, really great. How to do an award season?
Well, this type of film is not a huge award winner, but it did find some success. It did get 7 wins and 1 other nomination. The wins were primarily over in Korea at the Busan Film Critics Association. It did win Best Film and Best Director. And at the Korean Association of Film Critics, it won Best Director and Best Screenplay. Over here in the States, when it played at Fantasia Film Fest, it did end up getting Best Asian Film. So, it had some success, but it was really limited to kind of specific markets, I suppose you could say.
Now, it's part of the Vengeance trilogy. This is another one of those unofficial trilogies that became an official trilogy just because people willed it so. But it's not directly prequel to anything that comes after it.
No, and it's that's my sense. I mean, I've seen Old Boy. I haven't seen Lady Vengeance, but my understanding is none of these are connected except thematically. And some actors do appear in multiple films, but as different characters. So I don't think you could ever say that they are, in a sense, kind of sequels or anything.
Now, Old Boy has already been remade terribly. Is this one on deck?
I was surprised because it seems like such a tricky film to tell through Hollywood's eyes. But apparently back in 2010, Warner Brothers acquired the rights to do an American remake of it. They attached Brian Tucker to write the script, and it was going to be Lorenzo di Bonaventura and Mark Varadian, and they were going to be producing it. That was 2010. I have heard nothing since. My hunch is, especially because of the Old Boy remake not getting as well received, I don't think this is actually going to happen now.
Well, I stand relieved a little bit because this is one of those movies that I think it deserves to be seen as the original.
Yeah, I agree.
It'd be tough to remake this one. How to do in the box office?
Well, Chan-Wook spent an estimated $4 million on this film. I'm not sure what that means he spent in South Korean won, when he made it back in 2001, but that's the rough US figure, which is about $5.36 million in today's dollars. The movie opened in South Korea on March 29th, 2002, where it did relatively poorly, actually. The reception meant that it didn't get much of an international release, and it wasn't until August 19th, 2005, when it finally had a very limited release here in the States, where it opened on just 6 screens, in competition with 40-Year-Old Virgin, Red Eye, and the animated film Valiant. The movie earned a paltry $45,374 here in the US and $1.9 million everywhere else, giving it a total gross in today's dollars of $2.4 million. That means Chan-Wook's Trilogy started off with an adjusted loss per finished minute of almost $23,000. Not a great start for his trilogy.
That's really disappointing, especially given how I just feel about this movie. It deserves to have made that much money, not lost that much money.
You know what's funny is hearing him talk about it in the commentary. He does seem he seems surprised, but he also is just like, I just don't think people got there was supposed to be funny moments. I was trying to throw in some comedy here, and I don't think people really got it, and they just no one laughed when they watched it.
Yeah,
I felt like it was. He made a challenging film, and I think that people were challenged to a point where they're like, you know what, I don't want to be challenged this much when I watch a movie. I just want to go into a revenge movie and watch it. But I feel a little sad about that because I really enjoyed this movie. I felt like I got more out of it after listening to the commentary and really kind of hearing more about it and what their intentions were and everything. And I thought that I felt like going in and doing another rewatch or subsequent rewatches that I will just continue enjoying it more and more. I find him such a compelling director, and watching this film, I was just thrilled the entire time with the fact that I was in the hands of a filmmaker who was really actively trying to do something unique with his film.
I absolutely agree. I had a great time with this movie. I feel like, and I'm very much looking forward to watching Oldboy again because I feel like I understand sort of its spiritual place in the world, right? In terms of moving from where we are this week with vengeance or revenge into violence next week, and I get the spiritual connection between these 3 films. So I'm excited to see how that connective tissue plays out. But I'm with you. It really surprised me that I liked this movie as much as I did because I was baffled most of the time, my first watch through, and I still walked out saying, wow, I need to watch that again. That's amazing. That was amazing. So
yeah, really
this was a good watch. What do you think? Is it time for us to rank it?
I think it is. Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel and you can see our stack rankings of all the films we've talked about on this show. Or you can just swipe over in your show notes, tap Flickchart. It'll take you to this very movie where you can add it to your list and we can see how it stacks up against ours. Andy?
First up, we have Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance versus The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Mm-hmm. Which one?
Sorry. This is the Numi.
This is unfortunate. I think I'm going with Dragon Tattoo.
I feel like I've seen the Dragon Tattoo film in the various versions enough where I'm kind of done with that story. And I feel like I'm actually going to go with Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance here.
Okay, you've swayed me. Your rigorous debate.
I'm done with it.
You're done with it. Yeah, you win.
That's fine.
I rest.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Live Free or Die Hard. I'm going with Die Hard.
Yes.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Beverly Hills Cop.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance.
Yes, I agree. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or The Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz for me.
Okay.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Star Trek Nemesis.
Okay. I'm just going to say again.
I know.
This one was better than everybody says.
I agree. I'm going to say Nemesis.
Yeah, me too.
Although I feel wrong about that, but I am going to say it anyway. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or About a Boy. Oh, definitely About a Boy.
Oh, About a Boy.
Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or The Prestige.
The Prestige for me.
Yeah, I'll say The Prestige. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or The Abyss. The Abyss for
The
me.
Abyss, yes.
Mr. Vengeance or Mother? Oh, a little Korean film matchup. I'm gonna wow. I'm gonna say Mother.
Mother was so weird. I'm also going to say Mother. It was terrific.
Well, that leaves Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance at 129 on our chart. I think that's a pretty good spot for it.
Yeah, I think so too. It's interesting. It actually, I think it fared better. What does that give it as a percentage?
That's a 63%.
Well, yeah, interesting. Okay, so on mine, it hit 370 out of 1015, which puts it at 64%. Now,
oh, wow.
Yeah. How'd it do on yours?
Mine ended up at 1166 out of 3932, which is about 70%.
Interesting.
So yeah, even higher.
Even higher. So if I was to listen to the algorithm, I should be rating this as a 3-star. Solid 3-star on letterboxd.com/thenextreel. I think that's too low for how I'm feeling about this movie. I'm not sure if it's a 3.5 or 4-star film for me.
If it helps, this is a 4-star film for me.
It does help.
I was completely invigorated and just thrilled by the wacky world that I was thrust into and the darkness and just the way that Park Chan-Wook constructed it. I had an amazing time watching this film. So absolutely is 4-star.
Andy, I'm so glad you brought up 4 stars because I feel like we need to have a different kind of discussion now. It just did not make it to 5-star. So I would like to know where in the film you would have had to turn it off and just stop watching for it to remain a 5-star movie. This is the most absurd ranking system we've ever attempted.
I love it though. That's it. It's a really tough question too, because I should have been thinking about that while I was watching it.
I know. I wasn't really.
I feel like it would have, it starts off, I think, in enough of a confusing way where I don't think it would have been a 5-star right out of the gate, because it took me a long time to figure out what was going on with it. Because it starts off, you're looking at like a close-up of the radio DJ as she's reading his letter to his sister, and then we see them and we kind of see flashbacks and everything. It just made for kind of I had to look at it a couple times, like, who am I looking at? Why is this person in a voiceover booth? What's going on? It took me forever to figure out what was happening. So I felt like the construction at the beginning was a little rough.
So you're saying, really, I mean, if it were going to be a 5-star movie, it's, in the first 30 seconds,
yeah,
you would have to just bail.
I would have. I felt like that some of the open would have had to been a little cleaner in order for me to really be connected to it as a 5-star film.
I was a little bit more forgiving about the open. When I would have been super satisfied with this as a film, as if we'd ended on the kidney story. And like, I really could have ended as a 5-star movie with him waking up on the floor of the abandoned construction site.
Nice.
And just, wake up shocked and like, boom. Then we have an Alfred Hitchcock style guy tries to do a good thing and fails. And this is the price of no good deed goes unpunished. That's a solid little 5-star parable for me. So I'd leave it at that. I don't actually remember kind of where that was in the film, but certainly in the first half.
Right.
What a silly way to talk about a movie.
It is.
I love it. I just love it. Here's to next week with where do we go from here for the next part of the trilogy?
Yeah, we'll be jumping a couple years, talking about 2003's Old Boy that he did, and it's going to be a fun one to revisit. It is the one of this series that I had seen before, so I am looking forward to rewatching it and reliving that wacky world.
My memory of it's pretty good. I hope I'm not dismayed.
I doubt I will be, because I remember enjoying it quite a bit.
Right.
And if anything, it will be a great way to kind of cleanse myself of the pain I suffered watching Spike Lee's remake of it.
Yes. All right. Duly noted. The next reel could not happen without the hard work of everybody who is involved on this thing. That includes all the guys on the film board, Tommy and JJ and Steve Sarmento and the great Stephen Smart runs the Instagram program. Ben Sturek helps out over there. Ben Lott runs all things Twitter and the Blot Spot. And, of course, the next reel theme, Ragtime Instrumental, is performed by Eli Catlin, which you can find on his SoundCloud page. Thank you, everybody, for downloading, listening. You know the drill. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Oh, Andy. Not a lot of reviews on this movie.
Not as many as we would have liked to have been able to choose from.
No.
A lot of 5 stars, though. A lot of 5 stars.
Yeah, I think it was a healthy amount. I mean, it's in terms of just distribution, over 50%, roughly 53%. 5-star review. I, of course, went straight to the bottom, as we are wont to do. And would like to open the bidding with a 0-star review.
Take it away.
Of course, you can't have a 0-star review on Amazon, but Got to Be definitely thinks this, quote, deserves 0 stars. This movie was excessively hard to follow in efforts to appear, quote, artistic, and painfully slow to sit through. It takes more than an hour before any vengeance is taken. And even then, the emotions behind the revenge are so convoluted and unclear that whatever message the movie was trying to convey is lost. I wish I didn't waste 2 hours of my night watching this train wreck. Now, I adore that because I feel like it's in line, Andy, with the way you reviewed Detroit. Do you see how we circled back here? It's a movie about vengeance with not enough vengeance in it. And it comes too late, this vengeance.
That's fantastic. I love how we're going to keep bringing that circling around.
I think that's a deeper well than maybe you ever intended.
I think it's going to be. Well, I've got a 2-star by Harkinwar Anand, who says this is ridiculous. Are people comparing this to Oldboy? Oldboy was flabbergasting. It delivered an invisible slap of surprise on the watcher's face. Mr. Vengeance fails miserably at creating any sort of effect whatsoever. The storyline is a bit challenged, if you ask me. There's no real feeling of revenge, and most of the time the screenplay with characters coming in and going out creates confusion. It took me a while to understand what's actually going on. I watched this 40 days back and can't even recall what happens in the end. What's even more confusing is that I've known to have a prodigious memory of mind, or at least I claim to. In any case, absolute bollocks of a movie watching experience.
I'm sorry. We need a judge's ruling. I don't usually like to interrupt just right in the middle, but Andy.
That was the end of it.
I know.
He has a prodigious memory of mind, or at least he claims to.
And who remembers time in blocks of 40 days? Unless you're Noah, I think that we've kind of given up measuring time in 40 days.
Noah and Josh Hartnett. They're the only two.
Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy, and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-Wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.